Welcome to the Armageddon TV YouTube channel. The war between the Ukrainian armed forces and the Russian army is dragging Europe into new concerns. While dangerous clashes continue near Europe's largest nuclear power plant, breaths are held for the victory of the Ukrainian armed forces here. While the large-scale counterattack launched by the Ukrainian army in the Kherson region was causing more and more damage to the Russian army with each passing day, the Russian army entered into an inextricable situation as the logistics network of the Russian shipments was blocked. At the same time, serious conflicts are taking place in the Zaporizhzhia region, northeast of Kherson. The fact that the region is close to both Donbas and Kherson has made it a much more valuable piece of land recently. However, the risk of the nuclear power plant in the region threatens all of Ukraine and Europe. Satellite images report that there are clashes near the nuclear power plant in the Zaporizhzhia region and that these clashes pose a serious danger to the power plant. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been under fire since last weekend. Russia is using the nuclear power plant to blackmail both Ukraine and Europe. Ukrainian military officials report that the nuclear power plant was mined by the Russian army and was exposed to artillery fire. It was reported that the Russian army fired more than 60 artillery shells at the nuclear power plant over the weekend. On the other hand, Moscow blames Ukraine for the attacks near the nuclear power plant. However, independent reports and satellite images prove that the Russian army attacked the nuclear power plant. Still, both Russia and Ukraine deny responsibility for the attacks. An analysis of satellite imagery by NPR reveals how close the conflict in Ukraine is to inflicting serious damage on critical parts of the country. The study, which analyzed satellite images, photos, and videos shared on social media last month, showed us how the attacks are getting closer to the radioactive materials in the complex and how critical security systems are under threat. The nuclear facility fell into the hands of the Russian army in March, and the Russian army made a serious shipment to the region. When the intelligence reports from the region were examined, it was revealed that Russia used this facility as a military base center and carried out attacks from the facility to the Ukrainian lines. A satellite image taken by Planet Labs on July 3rd shows about a dozen Russian military vehicles parked near some administrative buildings. The Russians are also said to have set up several large tents on a plot nearby, possibly to house the troops tasked with guarding the facility. With the establishment of this camp, the proximity of the conflicts to the facility increased. Because while the Russian army was attacking the Ukrainian armed forces from the region, the Ukrainian armed forces did not stay idle. In late July, Ukrainian forces soon began targeting the Russian camp at the facility, and no matter how certain the Ukrainian attacks were, the facility still posed a risk to all of Ukraine and the surrounding European countries. Satellite images and videos also show how Russia is repositioning its troops and equipment right next to nuclear reactors to prevent additional attacks from the Ukrainian military. This poses an additional risk. Russia faced a global condemnation for planting military equipment at the plant, and Kyiv accused the Russian military of using the plant as a shield. The situation emerged between Ukraine and Russia. At the international level, there were many reactions to Russia. The situation became so dire that the G7 foreign ministers stepped in and demanded that Russia leave the facility immediately. This week, the foreign ministers of the world's 7 richest countries expressed deep concern over the threat posed by the military conflict around Europe's largest nuclear power plant. The ministers urged Russia to withdraw all its troops from the facility and said that Russia's presence there undermines the International Atomic Energy Agency's ability to monitor the security of nuclear activities in Ukraine. The G7 foreign ministers expressed their deep concern at the serious threat posed to the safety and security of Ukrainian nuclear facilities by the seizure and other actions of the Russian armed forces, noting that this significantly increases the risk of nuclear accidents or incidents. It is estimated that the Russian army will continue to use the nuclear facility as a base after Russia lost 9 aircraft and 4 ammunition depots in the attack on the Russian military airport in the Saki region of Crimea the other day. Because the Ukrainian armed forces is almost unlikely to carry out long-range artillery fire in the region. For this reason, the Russian army knows that the safest area is the facility and its surroundings. Putin's army is trying to turn this into an advantage by blackmailing both Ukraine and Europe with nuclear destruction. A debate that has arisen in recent days has also started to occupy the agenda frequently. Many European war experts began to question why Europe could not defend itself. The main reason for this was the defense of Europe by the USA for many years and the influence of NATO forces in Europe. Since the end of the World War II, throughout the Cold War, and continuing into the decades after the Cold War, the United States has been the primary defender of Europe. This is considered an extremely strange situation, and they think that Europe can defend itself without the need for US support. However, the security of the defense provided by the USA is an undeniable fact. Especially with the invasion of Ukraine, what emerged is necessity of NATO. The United States has the largest defense budget in the world history. Last year, the US military budget was $778 billion. China has come a long way by spending $252 billion. Meanwhile, Russia spent just $61 billion on its military. European countries are also making serious military investments. The UK military spends $59 billion, the German army $52 billion, and the French army $52 billion. With defense spending by just 3 NATO members roughly tripling Russia's defense spending, the United States does not seem to need to invest so heavily. Instead, the United States is pressing its European allies to increase their defense spending. While making this request, the United States has never reduced the size of its defense spending in Europe. However, in return for this contribution of the USA, Europe must also take responsibility. Frankly, European states considered military investments unnecessary just because of the presence and power of the US Army and avoided this huge cost. But now, Europe is totally dependent on the US and several large NATO armies. This is also a huge burden within the US military, but the strongest always have things to do. The US military is now fulfilling its responsibilities and keeping its throne intact. Some experts consider these investments of the USA unnecessary, because the war in Ukraine has shown that the Russian threat is serious but not insurmountable. But there's a point they missed. Ukraine has an absolute dependence on weapons from the West to be able to fight Russia. The Soviet Union was hollow and weak, hardly worth the massive US military attention. This point is relevant today, when the Russian army is struggling to overtake a novice, poorly equipped, unsophisticated Ukrainian force. The Russian threat was exaggerated, so are the US spending on European defense. However, at the end of the day, the necessity of NATO and the fact that its leader is the USA as the strongest army is absolutely clear. Just before Russia's invasion attempt began, French President Emmanuel Macron had argued that NATO was an outdated alliance and that the European Union should switch to military construction. Some countries were inwardly agreeing with this view. However, this view of Macron was just a blunder. Frankly, the only thing that prevented Europe from many wars within the continent was the existence of NATO. Despite NATO, many small-scale wars were fought, and somehow these wars were prevented thanks to the peace forces. The peaceful coexistence of dozens of states and nations in a continent as small as Europe certainly requires military unity and the necessity of a set of rules. Now in Europe, Putin's crazy move could not be stopped and NATO's value was understood. In fact, Finland and Sweden, two countries that have not been in any military alliance for many years and have prejudices against NATO, have also taken official steps to join NATO. For this reason, even though the USA's expenditures seem exaggerated, these expenditures may not even be sufficient considering the mission it has set for itself. If you see yourself as the world's police, you must have more deterrent power than anyone else. We hope that the Ukrainian army will be victorious against the Russian army soon and be able to stop Putin's crazy moves.